Welcome to the Cadence training video series. My name is Rakesh and today I am going to introduce to you the work order program in Cadence. So it's important to note that all types of work orders, whether it's a work order to replenish stock, a work order to repair and return a unit to a customer, or a vehicle service work order, all work orders are essentially tied to a quotation. It's important to note that as you go through the training courses, you would know that a quotation essentially, once everything is all said and done, would be converted to a sales order, the sales order to a packing slip, and the packing slip essentially to an invoice. So at the quotation level, which is where you would build out your work order, here on my screen I have work order number 1 for part number 1 that's attached to my quotation number 1. Once I create a work order, the work order would first exist in an unauthorized state. And here you would see the options are very limited in regards to what you can do while a work order exists in this unauthorized state. So I can go into my work order, I can add notes such as a course correction complaint. I can add and upload documents such as pictures to my work order. If it's a vehicle service work order, I can look at the history of the vehicle and all the various jobs that was done in the past. There's a miscellaneous option here wherein you can go in and add your cost of miscellaneous items such as welding supplies and stuff like that. And you can also put a potential selling price. So let's say if you bought welding supplies $100 and maybe you want to charge the customer $200 for those welding supplies, essentially you have an option to enter in that type of data, which would then reflect throughout what we call your work order summary page, which shows exactly what your true cost would be, as well as what you should truly be selling your overall finished good to the customer at. You have the ability to enter in reference book hours, again, against your unauthorized work order, wherein you can put in, let's say this job should take you no more than 6 hours, and the system uses the department associated with your particular part number that you're building, and it looks at the hourly rate for that department, and it uses the reference book hours to then come up with potentially what, if everything goes according to plan, how much you should be charging for labor based on the department rate. It also shows you, again, if it's an internal part that if it's a part that you're rebuilding and not a vehicle service, you may want to see the last 10 times that you received this part and what was your historical cost for the last 10 jobs that you did for this part number. You do have the ability to see what are the last 10 times you sold this particular part number to a customer, and what were the various selling prices and the margins that you made for this particular item that you're rebuilding. You do have the ability to clock on and off this job, and you do have the ability to enter in required parts. So essentially you could go in, enter all your parts that you need, and come up with an average estimate of, you could essentially go in and enter all the parts and enter all the information that you need and come up with an estimate for the customer, and provide a quotation to the customer. Now, if the customer does give you the authorization to move ahead with the job, you do have the option to change the quotation to and change the work order from an unauthorized state to an authorized state, at which point you'll now have the ability to allocate parts against the work order. So allocate parts means that you're going to actually deduct the parts from inventory and charge it against the work order. Also, just a few bells and whistles wherein all the parts that's required, the system automatically would generate for you a list of parts to pull from inventory. It would then show up on all your PO creation pages and whatnot, wherein when you're trying to create a PO or on your various reports associated with creating a PO, the system would say, hey, these are parts that it's required for part of a work order. However, you don't have stock, and hence you need to order the parts. Also, if it's a vehicle service work order, there's an option that's available only for vehicle service work orders where you can almost create a quick PO within that within the work order itself. You can enter in your vendor, your description of your parts, the part that you need, the cost from the vendor, etc., and the system would check the validity of the parts that's entered onto this form. If the part is not in the system, it would create the part number, create the work order for you. I'm sorry, it would create the part number for you. It would create the purchase order for you, etc. This way, once the part comes in and it's received by the warehouse guys, the system will tell them that these parts are for work order number 1. So again, at the end of everything, you would create your work order. Your work order would first go and unauthorize. You would then authorize your work order. And then once everything is all said and done and you have entered in all of your parts and you have finished your work order, essentially what you would do at that point is you would receive your work order or mark it as closed. And once your work order is marked as closed, you would then be given the option to convert that quotation to a sales order, then from sales order to an invoice. There's an option here which I wanted to just take a quick minute and show you, wherein for a vehicle service work order, you do have additional functionalities where you can potentially have multiple work orders running at a given time for a quotation. This option, again, is only available for vehicle service work orders at this point. So you can potentially have a vehicle come in, you can create work order number 1 as a diagnostic, you could go through the process of diagnosing the customer's vehicle, you could then add a second labor job onto that, such as maybe labor, time and material, or maybe oil change, or you can create, again, these pre-canned labor part numbers, and you can have as many different jobs running on a single quotation at a given time, right? And your technicians can, you can have multiple technicians clocking onto the job all simultaneously, and so there's a lot of functionalities that's now available for the vehicle service section. So again, just wanted to take a quick moment and show you the layout and the structure of the work order. And as you start going through the various videos, you'll kind of see how these various options starts making a lot of sense. So again, thanks for looking at the video, and go Cadence.